Dr. Travis Taylor is finally breaking his silence. Minutes ago, he revealed that an entire episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch was permanently banned, not because of safety, not because of technical failure, but because of something they recorded in the sky that night. A silent object hovering above the mesa disrupted every camera, sensor, and data log simultaneously. Production never aired the episode. Until now, no one knew why, and what Travis just exposed may explain why government officials arrived before sunrise. Subscribe before we continue. It began with a hesitation. During a recent behind-closed-doors interview for a scientific symposium, Dr. Travis Taylor was discussing the evolution of Skinwalker Ranch research when a reporter asked a casual question about never-before-seen data. Travis paused, long enough that the room fell silent. Then, instead of brushing it off like he had done countless times in past interviews, he leaned into the microphone and quietly admitted that one investigation during production was forcibly halted, and the entire episode was banned from ever airing. According to Travis, it was not due to safety errors, lost footage, or team disputes, but because of what appeared in the sky. Until that moment, no one in the public was supposed to know it even existed. He explained that filming took place late into the night on a routine weather monitoring test. At 1:43 a.m., sensors picked up a sudden magnetic spike above the mesa. Travis noted it as a probable equipment glitch. 30 seconds later, the spike doubled. Crew members described feeling a subtle vibration in the ground beneath their feet, as though something unseen had shifted above them. The atmosphere changed, silent, heavy, like static before lightning. But the sky was clear. As cameras turned upward, a dark shape emerged just beyond the thin cloud layer. No light, no sound, no heat signature consistent with aircraft. Travis says it moved with intentional stillness, remaining suspended, as if physically anchored to the airspace. Moments later, every camera pointed at the object froze. The feed didn't go black. It locked, timestamp running, image unchanged. Within minutes, drones dropped, equipment rebooted, all recorded files from that hour corrupted completely. Production notified network executives by satellite phone. By sunrise, an order had come in: do not mention it again. And for the first time, Travis Taylor just did. According to Travis, what made that night so disturbing wasn't just the unidentified object floating silently above the mesa. It was how impossible it was to scientifically categorize. At first glance, the team suspected an experimental military drone or satellite flare. But the object seemed to generate no thermal trace, no transponder signal, and exerted sudden localized electromagnetism without registering any known propulsion. The data captured in the first 18 seconds before the equipment failure reflected directional interference, almost like targeted pressure applied to specific camera angles. It reacted to being observed, Travis stated. He claims they captured a split-second frame before system lock, a shape almost disc-like, but appearing semi-translucent, as if light warped around it. The absence of heat signature puzzled him most. If it was metal, we'd see thermal buildup. If it was plasma or energy-based, there would be dissipation. This was neither. Moments after the still image was frozen, several team members reported experiencing short-term disorientation. One crew operator described it as "my depth perception twisting inward." Another, usually skeptical, claimed a high-frequency ringing sound for nearly 40 seconds that didn't register on any device. The stationary weather sensors, however, spiked into what Travis described as vector disturbance frequencies, anomalous readings known to mimic gravitational variation. What terrified them wasn't that something was there. It was that whatever it was knew they were watching it. Instead of retreating or accelerating like objects have been seen doing before, it held its position mid-air, as if absorbing data from them. Electricity in the generator surged, cameras glitched in rotation. Communication lines went from normal to scrambled audio, momentarily transmitting reversed speech across the team's comms. At 1:46 a.m., without any visible movement, the object vanished, not darting away, just gone. Sensors instantly flatlined, and that's when they realized the night had just begun unraveling. Seconds after the object blinked out of existence, every live feed on their central monitor wall flipped from tracking sky angles to pointing directly at the team. No one touched the control. According to Travis, it looked as though someone or something had remotely overridden the camera matrix. Each camera, positioned across multiple acres and locked on fixed survey patterns, simultaneously shifted inward to center on the men and women in the command trailer. It was watching them back. The tech team scrambled. Systems were manually rebooted, cables were physically pulled, backup batteries were disengaged, yet the feeds remained active. Our equipment wasn't online, yet it was still broadcasting, Travis recalled. It was like the entire system had a memory of us, even after it was dead. Audio clips recovered later were far worse. A total loss of radio communication occurred for 2 minutes and 24 seconds. But during that blackout, static wasn't silent. Instead, fragments of conversations, their own voices from earlier in the evening, began playing back, distorted and reversed, as if mocking them. One clip repeatedly looped Travis's earlier statement: "We must observe without interfering." Only the playback distorted it into something horrifying. "We observe, you interfere." Temperature inside the trailer dropped 15 degrees in under a minute. Cold, without wind or reason. The generator outside surged erratically. Several crew members described feeling as if an invisible pressure pressed against their chest, making breath difficult. A seasoned military contractor, normally composed under stress, abruptly exited the trailer without explaining why and refused to return for the remainder of the night. When the camera feeds finally cut to black, one screen, just one, remained lit. It showed an infrared silhouette standing approximately 40 yards from the trailer, not moving, no heat output, just an outline of a figure-shaped void. Travis stepped outside to confirm visually. There was nothing there, yet inside, the image stayed on screen until all power died. That was the moment he realized this wasn't just technology failing, it was being controlled. After the camera feeds cut to black and the silhouette vanished from the infrared monitor, the team retreated from the trailer, rattled but trying to regain control. Travis, always the scientific anchor, ordered a full reset of the command center. Backup power was initiated using portable generators, and 3 researchers attempted to re-establish baseline communications with the off-site monitoring facility. What happened next pushed the team from shaken to deeply disturbed. At precisely 2:13 a.m., while rebooting the external tracking system, the FLIR, forward-looking infrared, unit atop the ridge locked onto a moving target without user command. Startled, the tech team watched the object return at low altitude, traveling at a speed estimated between 400 and 600 miles per hour. Even more unnerving than its velocity was its flight pattern. It wasn't moving through the air. It appeared to phase or skip across the sky, leaving no thermal trail except during brief microbursts when it sharply altered direction at impossible angles. "This thing didn't bank like an aircraft," Travis later explained. "It pivoted like it wasn't flying, like it was teleporting in extremely short bursts." 3 seconds later, every animal in the surrounding field went silent. 25 seconds after that, seismic sensors registered a sudden, intense, energetic pulse originating above the mesa, approximately 250 feet off the ground. The atmospheric pressure spike caused several on-site monitoring tablets to shatter without impact. The smell of ozone filled the air, and a faint electrical crackling could be heard, described by one crew member as like static crawling across metal. The unidentified object paused directly above the mesa plateau, motionless for nearly 18 seconds. During that stillness, all remaining audio logging equipment captured a low-frequency humming that fluctuated between 17 and 19 hertz, the same range associated with migraine induction, visual disturbances, and flight or fight activation in humans. Several crew members reported nausea, disorientation, and extreme emotional unease. Then came what terrified them most. The object didn't just depart. It ascended vertically at such velocity, the instrumentation could only record the start of acceleration before contact was lost. No sonic boom, no visible displacement of air. It simply vanished. Moments later, the primary system console, which had remained offline since the blackout, powered back on by itself. A single message appeared across all screens. Not yours to see. No one in the command center typed it. That was the moment Travis Taylor realized this was no longer observation. They were part of the experiment, and the question none of them could shake was, how long had it been watching them first? The mesa went dark again after the message appeared on the monitors, but the team wasn't done processing what they just witnessed when another wave hit. This time not visual, but electrical. Travis ordered the remaining equipment to be shut down. He wanted controlled silence, no interference. Yet, even with power cut off at the breaker box, handheld EMF meters began spiking higher than any reading previously recorded on the ranch. The spikes weren't random, they were patterned. One meter flashed at 2.4 milligauss, then 4.8, then 9.6, ascending in a perfect doubling sequence as though mapped to a binary progression. Travis, shocked, muttered, "That's not natural. Something's counting." Before the crew could respond, the EMF readings jumped past measurable thresholds. The instruments overloaded and went silent. Immediately after that silence, every smartphone in the command area, powered off and with batteries removed, vibrated simultaneously. When they checked the screens, each displayed the same thing, a timestamp of 2:13:18. The exact second the object paused above the mesa before its vertical departure. They hadn't taken their phones outside. They hadn't stood beneath the object. It had marked them from afar. As the EMF wave continued radiating outward, crew members reported a strange static sensation along their arms, as though hair follicles were being tugged. One historian on site began speaking incoherently, referencing dates from 1776, 1947, and 2023 in rapid succession, none of which connected coherently. Another researcher suddenly vomited without showing any symptoms moments prior. Several described the sensation of pressure inside their ears, as though they'd entered a deep underwater descent. The most unsettling response came from a former military intelligence officer assigned to observe the ranch operations. He froze in place, eyes unfocused, and whispered, "It's testing our reactions. It's seeing how far it can push." When asked what it was, he blinked, regained awareness, and claimed no memory of speaking. Travis later theorized that the surge wasn't merely energy, it was directional stimulus, something probing both physiology and cognition. Minutes after the wave dissipated, a geologist monitoring subterranean channels reported a sudden pressure flux beneath the mesa, the same pattern observed before past anomalies involving cattle decompressions and light beam anomalies. The implication chilled Travis more than anything else that night. Whatever was above wasn't just affecting electronics, it was probing the people, testing what the human threshold was, and the energy signatures indicated one alarming truth, that whatever they encountered was not leaving. It was repositioning, waiting, or worse, preparing for the next escalation. Following the EMF surge, the research team was advised to suspend investigation and evacuate until conditions stabilized. Travis, however, insisted they review all data before leaving the property. "If we walk now without understanding what just happened," he said, "we may never get another chance." It would be a decision that many on the crew later regretted. At approximately 3:07 a.m., they attempted one final sweep of the mesa access point. 3 team members, including Travis, stepped outside the command trailer with handheld detection gear and radiation counters. Temperatures were stable, EMF was no longer spiking, but the moment they passed beyond the floodlight's perimeter, their radios crackled, not with static, but with their own voices from earlier that day. One transmission repeated a phrase that Travis had uttered during routine setup hours earlier. "If tonight is quiet, we look deeper." Except the playback warped it. "If they're quiet tonight, we go deeper." The distinction hit hard. As they neared the mesa's shadow line, the ridge monitoring unit, completely disconnected since the blackout, activated on its own. A deep, bass-like vibration rolled under their feet. The sensation was similar to standing next to a freight train passing under the ground. The radiation counter jumped from normal levels to nearly 30 microsieverts in under 5 seconds, forcing them to halt. One operator began bleeding lightly from his nose. Then, the environment shifted. Wind began blowing from the wrong direction, inward, toward the mesa, even though weather records confirmed still air that night. Dust, leaves, and dry brush gravitated towards a point near a rock shelf. It was like the land itself was exhaling towards something unseen. Travis shouted for retreat, but the ground suddenly rumbled, a shallow quake without any seismographic alerts off-site. Then the floodlights went out, all of them. Every single light source, even battery lanterns and infrared beams, extinguished instantly, as if swallowed rather than shut off. One team member screamed in the darkness, not out of pain, but panic. He reported seeing movement beside him, a humanoid outline walking parallel, matching his pace without producing sound. Others felt a sudden gravitational pull toward the mesa, as though their center of mass was temporarily manipulated. Travis, barely able to see, issued the command to abort and fall back to the trailer. The entire retreat happened in silence. No footsteps heard except their own. No wind, only pressure. When they reached the threshold of the command center and crossed under the canopy, the lights returned. Instant, no flicker. Everything was exactly as it had been 5 minutes prior, except one piece of equipment, a handheld thermal scope, had captured a single frame during the blackout. On reviewing it, white-hot signatures of multiple human-shaped figures could be seen descending from above the mesa, spaced evenly apart, right where the air pressure had centered minutes earlier. Travis marked that moment in his private field log with a single sentence: "It didn't want us near that location, not to observe, not to understand, because something was there it was trying to protect or hide." And that is when he knew if they stayed any longer, they wouldn't have been allowed to leave. Once the team reassembled inside the command trailer, shaken and covered in dirt, an urgent internal debate began, not about what they had witnessed, but whether any of it should ever leave the ranch. Multiple crew members argued it posed too great a risk, not only scientifically but psychologically and possibly politically. Travis, visibly distressed but trying to maintain composure, stated that what they recorded could redefine everything we think we understand about physics, surveillance, and possibly intelligence that predates us. Minutes after power fully stabilized, backup drives automatically initiated data synchronization through the network hub. But something happened that no one had expected. The footage and sensor logs tied directly to the blackout window began vanishing in real time. Audio clips were replaced with blank static. Video feeds rewound and rewrote themselves to erase the object above the mesa, the thermal outlines, and all EMF telemetry from the surge. A tech specialist attempted to isolate the data and force manual preservation, but the system overwrote everything directly on the drives. When they disconnected them physically, the damage was already done. It was as if the ranch itself had edited the files. A heated confrontation erupted. One senior advisor demanded they report the incident to federal partners immediately, claiming the signature was not of known terrestrial origin. Another, who had observed similar anomalies tied to classified projects, countered, warning that disclosure could result in shutdown of the entire program and seizure of all personal materials. One researcher, in near tears, suggested destroying the surviving notes entirely and quietly ending the investigation before someone got hurt. That's when the head of security entered the room with updated clearance protocols from higher up. According to him, the incident had already been forwarded through encrypted channels, but the official response was chillingly brief. Suspend analysis. Do not pursue replication. Not for public release. No mention of safety. No questions about what happened. Just a directive to stop. Travis pushed back. He argued that halting investigation meant abandoning all scientific integrity. What we saw was deliberate, he said. Whatever interacted with us demonstrated the ability to not only affect our surroundings, but to erase our documentation of it. If we don't try to understand it, we remain at its mercy. But the reply that came next from the comms officer silenced the room. They didn't say, "Don't research it." They said, "Don't try to show it." That distinction landed like a warning shot. It wasn't that the discovery couldn't be studied. It simply couldn't be witnessed by anyone outside that compound. And so, That's how the decision was made. Not to deny what happened, but to contain it. The footage wasn't just lost. It was intentionally buried because someone or something had made it very clear that the world isn't supposed to see what really happened that night above the mesa. In the months that followed, silence became policy. Contracts were extended, statements were moderated, and that night was officially categorized as data corrupted due to environmental interference. But off-camera, the crew's behavior spoke volumes. Several members left the field entirely, some reporting persistent nightmares of a figure standing beyond their window, while others claimed their electronics would activate without power, just like the ranch equipment did during the incident. One technician even relocated out of state, telling a colleague, "I can work somewhere with ghosts or creatures, but not something that watches you think." Travis quietly preserved fragments of evidence through handwritten logs and voice recordings made on analog devices, machines incapable of remote access. In one log, he wrote, "Whatever we encountered did not react to us. Its appearance triggered our observation systems. We weren't recording it, it was activating us." When production resumed, the Mesa episode was scrapped and replaced with safer content. Viewers saw controlled edits, lost equipment data, unstable weather, no mention of airborne anomalies. But earlier this year, during a private panel, Travis broke the script. Without naming specifics, he said, "There was one night when the ranch decided what it would let us see, and it chose something we weren't prepared for." That comment was cut from official release within 24 hours, but a leaked offline clip now circulates quietly among researchers. Travis ended his private memo with a chilling line. "We keep trying to study the phenomenon, but what if that night it was studying us? Not to harm, but to measure response." And that leaves one final question, the one the footage didn't erase. If it already knows how we react, what happens when it decides to test us again? Skinwalker Ranch owner Brandon Fugel finally addressed the moment that nearly ended the investigation for good. In a rare unscripted statement, he admitted there was a point during excavation beneath the mesa when the team encountered something so unnatural, so reactive, that he immediately ordered the dig to stop. According to Fugel, the discovery posed unpredictable consequences and should have never been disturbed. Camera feeds were cut, thermal data confiscated, and the area sealed. Subscribe for the full breakdown, because what he just revealed changes everything. For months, the team at Skinwalker Ranch monitored unexplained interference patterns beneath the southern edge of the mesa, patterns that didn't match naturally occurring geological movement or standard electromagnetic fluctuation. The sensors, buried across multiple depth points, began registering rhythmic pulses at precise intervals, almost like something cycling or responding from below. At first, it was shrugged off as instrumentation error. But when multiple systems, thermal, seismic, and radar, recorded the same frequencies simultaneously, attention shifted. Brandon Fugel initially resisted excavation. Despite being the owner and main financial backer, he repeatedly warned that disturbing soil at locations with active anomalies had historically resulted in escalation, referencing earlier incidents when drilling triggered unexplained mechanical failures and skyborne activity. Pressure to investigate mounted after an unmarked low-pressure point was detected below the mesa that showed no geological reason for existing. The team believed there could be an underground structure, potentially artificial, buried, and undisturbed. Fugel hesitated, but approved the pre-excavation radar survey under strict environmental containment protocol. When ground-penetrating radar returned an image, angular, with seemingly straight-lined contours, debate erupted. Phil Torres argued it could be a chamber or collapsed facility. Technical staff believed it might be natural stratification, but the most unsettling point came from an acoustics consultant who noted the returned echo profile aligned more with open density, as if something hollow existed beneath them. Several advisors suggested pausing. A Ute tribal liaison quietly recommended avoiding that specific area, recounting generational warnings tied to that stretch of the mesa, stating, "The ground remembers what's placed in it." Fugel considered canceling, but after multiple failed attempts to explain the readings conventionally, he reluctantly authorized Stage 1 soil removal under daylight supervision only. The first dig was shallow, controlled, minor, and monitored live. Nothing unusual occurred, but as depth increased past the first meter, the anomaly reacted differently. Equipment stability dropped sharply, sensors failed to recalibrate, and the pulse pattern intensified. From that moment, the team believed they might not just be uncovering something, but possibly interacting with it. And as they moved deeper into the earth, reactions intensified. The moment the ground shifted was coming, and no one was ready. The excavation entered its second stage at 10:03 a.m., under strict control and supervised by both geological and technical personnel. With the initial meter cleared, everything appeared stable. Instrumentation still flickered occasionally, but no obvious environmental hazards emerged. A light wind moved through the canyon. Crew members later noted that it felt deceptively calm, as if the location was waiting. As the excavator dug past the 2-meter depth, however, the sensors, previously pulsing at irregular intervals, suddenly began registering at exact 10.6-second cycles, active across multiple platforms simultaneously. This forced the team to pause and recalibrate. The calibration failed. Drone reconnaissance was deployed next, but both drones experienced unexpected downward thrust, even with stable weather readings. Flight logs showed artificial interference manipulating altitude controls. The machines struggled to ascend more than 10 feet above the dig site. Engineers assumed electromagnetic disruption, but Phil Torres privately suggested something in the ground seemed to be pulling, as though resisting aerial observation. The digging resumed manually to avoid triggering automated system reactions. By late afternoon, the exposed area revealed discolored soil compressed into distinct layers, unnaturally flat, not consistent with natural sedimentation. A geologist pointed out faint trace elements of compounds that should not exist at that depth unless introduced artificially. The moment that raised the most concern came when a contractor accidentally placed his gloved hand against the soil deposit. He reported feeling a low-frequency vibration in his sternum, like a heartbeat inside rock. He removed his hand instantly and claimed his chest felt tight for several minutes. Data collected from localized ground sensors at that exact moment registered a 0.2 microtremor. Despite no seismic activity recorded within 200 miles, Phil requested deeper core sampling to understand what lay beneath the newly exposed strata. Fugel hesitated, but approved the test given the emerging significance. As the core drill advanced, air pressure around the site began dropping. For 17 seconds, sound meters detected a compression wave moving outward from the shaft. Yet, no wind occurred. The crew started hearing faint, rhythmic thumps, felt through their boots, not heard through the air. One technician later wrote it felt like being above something, breathing. They kept digging. None of them understood that what they were encountering wasn't being uncovered. It was responding. And within hours, the first truly alarming shift would take place. Because when night fell over the mesa, the ground itself began to move. Dig operations had ceased for the evening at precisely 6:48 p.m. While surface-level conditions remained outwardly stable, multiple team members had filed quiet concerns about prolonged internal unease. The monitoring posts were left active overnight per Fugel's request, collecting ambient seismic, thermal, and radio frequency data. Just before midnight, the first alert triggered automatically on the remote surveillance terminal. What registered initially appeared as a microquake, but the pulse signature did not match geological behavior. It was too symmetrical. Data compared against ambient wave patterns suggested directional energy pulsing from below, not lateral displacement typical of seismic motion. Phil was the first to return to the dig site, arriving with a field technician. The air was unnaturally still. Visual observation showed no shifts on the surface, but when logging sonar returned, what they saw was described as subsurface volumetric fluctuation, a slow uplift followed by a subtle release, spaced exactly 11 seconds apart. as if the Earth itself were exhaling and inhaling. Jessica arrived moments later and noted the ground felt slightly warm, despite temperature drops at night. Instrument readings showed a localized heat difference of 4.2 degrees, confined to a 21-foot radius directly around the excavation pit. The team activated ground microphones to isolate the source of the pulses. What came through was unlike anything logged on previous investigations. Instead of chaotic interference or audio warping, the signal was uniform, repetitive, like coded vibration. A field acoustic analyst later noted it resembled resonance intended to stabilize mass, not disperse it. Moments later, one of the stabilization sensors collapsed inward, falling into the hole despite being securely staked outside the cut line. Equipment readings began failing. Battery life dropped at accelerated speed, signal loss cascaded across receivers, and core drill telemetry spiked at 400% activity, despite being inactive. Phil radioed Fugel directly, advising temporary suspension and evacuation. According to internal report snippets, before issuing his directive, Fugel asked one question: "Is the ground rising?" The next reading answered for them. The soil within the pit swelled upward approximately 1.3 centimeters without external pressure. Movement was slow but undeniable. A technician watching the live thermal overlay gasped, claiming he saw a pattern forming along the lifted earth, something repeating the same frequency signature logged earlier. Then alarms triggered simultaneously across all monitors. The ground didn't just shift again, it reacted. And when the team replayed the footage from this moment, Fugel made the decision that changed the entire course of the excavation. During the incident, the primary live cameras failed exactly as expected once the anomaly spiked, but an auxiliary security feed, stored on an off-network recorder, kept running. It wasn't part of the official telemetry grid and only existed as a backup, intended for visual asset security. Hours later, when the crew reviewed the footage, nobody expected to see anything beyond static. What they found instead became the most alarming piece of visual evidence ever recorded at Skinwalker Ranch. At 11:53 p.m., as the soil rose and then slowly settled, the camera captured a distortion forming just beneath the excavation rig. It appeared as a faint compression ripple, followed by a sudden pull inward, like mass was consolidating in a localized pocket. Infrared overlay, for a split second, registered a human-sized void occupying the exact center of the pit. But unlike regular temperature anomalies, this one showed no heat signature, no reflection, and no surface disruption. It appeared, stabilized momentarily, and then sank deeper, as if aware of observation. Slow-motion audio sync revealed a harmonic tone that flickered precisely when the distortion appeared. One analyst said the anomaly looked like something under the soil was testing the surface tension, not breaking through, just applying pressure. When replayed with contrast enhancement, it appeared that faint branching cracks formed cyclically in the dirt, not random patterned, suggesting controlled stress. That's when Brandon Fugel, watching remotely, uttered the words later repeated in confidentiality: "Shut it down! We should have never dug there." The excavation officially ended in that moment, but the ground did not stop reacting. The moment the auxiliary feed was replayed and the anomaly's behavior confirmed, Brandon Fugel arrived at the control hub unannounced. Witnesses describe him as unusually calm but visibly tense, watching the footage on silent loop. After a prolonged pause, he requested the final seismic overlay. When the technician zoomed in on the subsurface displacement model, Fugel reportedly whispered, "It's zeroed in on the excavation point." Moments later, localized vibration returned, this time increasing in frequency, mirroring the exact timestamp where the technician earlier reported chest pressure. The crew noted that the readings didn't resemble geological activity at all. Instead, they displayed progression, targeted movement shifting lower into the shaft. At 12:07 a.m., he issued the official order: "Seal it immediately. No more cutting, no more testing. We shouldn't have dug there." Those words froze the room. Production halted. Excavators were withdrawn. Within minutes, the site became restricted, and the crew was repositioned outside the containment zone. Engineers attempted to document residual sensor output, but the readings began fluctuating independently, even with all equipment disconnected. Battery packs dropping to zero, core sampling rigs warming unexpectedly, unexpectedly, and minor electromagnetic pulses clustering around the excavation rim despite zero incoming power. One contractor reported that the soil reshaped slightly again, this time not upward, but compressing toward the perimeter, like the ground trying to reset itself. He refused to continue work and later filed for removal from the project. Fugel personally instructed that the dig zone be filled and sealed with reinforced mineral packing, not standard soil. He demanded that no personnel re-enter the site until further notice and insisted that data logs skip automated cloud backup to prevent off-site distribution. In post-brief discussion, his stance shifted from curiosity to containment. "Whatever is beneath this mesa," he said, "it wasn't meant to be disturbed, and it knew when we tried." What he didn't expect was that the anomaly would continue reacting even after being buried. After the dig site was sealed and equipment disconnected, the crew expected activity to cease immediately. Instead, sensors that were supposed to be offline began transmitting residual readings without any recorded power source. Auto-logging captured a sequence of faint but consistent fluctuations in the newly packed material, as if something beneath it was still adjusting. At 1:14 a.m., nearly an hour after shutdown, the remote seismic monitor registered directional movement, not toward the excavation pit, but away from it, slow, measured, deliberate, heading northeast along the underground gradient. Phil Torres, still on site analyzing live feeds, noticed that the movement aligned exactly with the path where the crew stood during their final minutes at the pit. Heat void signatures ran parallel to footprints captured earlier that afternoon. Forensic technicians later confirmed a 0.8-degree drop in temperature within those exact coordinates, like something was tracing the path back. One analyst noted the pattern mimicked human pacing. What alarmed the team wasn't the shift itself. It was what happened when they reviewed thermal scans from the moments after sealing. The mass didn't just move beneath the earth. It elevated slightly, creating a spectral impression hugging the underside of topsoil. It followed where people had stood, pausing for seconds at points where crew members reported anxiety earlier in the investigation. At 1:26 a.m., a ground microphone, left unintentionally active, captured a low, gliding frequency that corresponded directly with the seismic shift. It wasn't random. The pattern matched the timing of the technician's heartbeat from the collapse event hours earlier. That's when the medical lead advised temporary withdrawal, stating, "If this thing can align to someone's physiology, we may not be at risk from proximity, but from recognition." The crew cleared the zone completely by 1:40 a.m., but the scans continued recording movement beneath the mesa. And by morning, at least one team member would admit they didn't sleep, not because of what they saw, but because of what they felt might leave the ground next. By morning, the excavation site showed no visible disturbance. The seal packing appeared intact. No instruments triggered alarms. On the surface, it looked as if nothing had happened. But the change didn't come from beneath the mesa. It came from the people who'd been closest to it. Within hours, 3 crew members reported deep chest pressure, not pain, but a sensation described as like gravity pulling into my ribs. One technician said he could still feel the rhythmic pulses they'd detected underground, even though no monitors registered ongoing anomalies. Another admitted he avoided stepping anywhere near the dig site, despite no logical reason, stating bluntly, "It feels like standing over something that remembers you were here." During medical assessment, mild tremors were observed in 2 individuals when shown footage of the excavation area. Even without sound, their heart rates accelerated in perfect sync with the timestamp where ground displacement had been detected the night before. A visiting analyst confirmed that even reviewing still images triggered physiological responses consistent with anticipation stress. No one wanted to use the word fear, but more than one admitted to feeling recognized. Psychological observations documented recurring dreams reported by 2 crew members. Both described being beneath the soil, aware of moonlight above them but unable to reach the surface. One wrote privately that they woke believing they heard the ground breathing through me. Neither returned to the mesa that day. Brandon Fugel suspended all subterranean operations indefinitely, stating that future future investigations would avoid direct intrusion of ground-level anomaly. He reportedly told senior staff, "Whatever was under us, interacting with it may have allowed it to interact with us." What he didn't disclose publicly was that the anomaly had not fully receded, and in the hours ahead, records would reveal it wasn't finished reacting. Earlier today, when pressed during a recorded interview about why excavation beneath the mesa was halted without public explanation, Brandon Fugal finally addressed the event directly. His response was brief but deliberate. He stated, "We began digging because we believed we were investigating something passive. What I realized too late was that we were interacting with something active." The room fell silent. He went on to explain that while the team expected geological feedback or possible industrial remnants, what appeared during the survey showed signs of conscious reaction. "It didn't behave like pressure release. It behaved like awareness," he added. When asked whether the team had disturbed something, Fugal paused before replying, "I believe we caused an environmental response that was not naturally occurring, and we should have never dug there." He emphasized the decision to cease operations was not made out of caution, but out of prevention. His final comments suggested deeper concern than logistical risk. Some discoveries should only be observed, not touched, because once you interact with them, they can interact back. The interviewer attempted to clarify if the phenomenon posed danger to the public. Fugal didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "We sealed it because it reacted to attention. And if you air something like that, you amplify it." Seconds later, the network cut to a break. When cameras returned, no further questions about excavation were allowed. Following Fugal's statement, internal sources confirmed that the excavation site remains sealed under reinforced containment material, now monitored exclusively through remote sensors at carefully controlled intervals. No crew members are permitted to physically step onto the location without written authorization from both the medical supervisor and Fugal himself. Even then, conditions stipulate daylight-only presence and zero soil disturbance. Recent reports state that new anomalies continue to register intermittently: subtle changes in ground density patterns, low-frequency audio traces, and occasional microfluctuations in thermal readings. None have escalated beyond initial thresholds, but analysts note that each event spikes when historical footage from the dig is reviewed in proximity to the mesa. Production officials have quietly moved excavation operations to alternate areas with less sensor interference. Equipment originally used in the dig has been isolated in storage and flagged with a limited exposure protocol, meaning only designated personnel can access the machinery, and only while monitored. Two technicians who experienced post-digature symptoms are no longer active on the project and requested assignment removal, citing prolonged internal dissonance. While no official statement links these symptoms to the excavation, multiple internal memos acknowledge persistent effect markers. To date, there are no plans to resume digging at the site. Future investigations will rely solely on above-ground scanning and atmospheric tracking. In a closed meeting, Fugal reportedly said, "We didn't find something buried. We woke something that already knew we were here." When asked if he fears that whatever reacted underground might re-emerge, he responded, "It's still reacting. We're choosing not to provoke it further. For now, the site remains sealed. The ground is silent, but few believe it is still. And while no formal closure has been announced, those involved in the dig already understand the truth. They will never dig there again. Not because they can't, but because they shouldn't. And the deeper question now isn't what's buried under Skinwalker Ranch. It's what might already be awake beneath it.
The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch became History Channel's biggest hit. 6 successful seasons documenting the unknown with real science and PhD researchers. Season 7 began filming April 2024. Episodes aired weekly. Then suddenly, after episode 7, everything stopped. No new episodes. No explanation. 4 months of complete silence from Brandon Fugal and the team. Fans demanded answers. Where is Season 7? Subscribe, because yesterday Brandon finally revealed everything. Dr. Travis Taylor was hospitalized with life-threatening radiation exposure. The team discovered an underground chamber 147 feet down containing ancient technology. The EPA quarantined the site. Insurance was revoked. Production halted immediately. This wasn't a creative break. This was an emergency shutdown. Brandon just told the complete truth about what really happened. And it's more serious than anyone imagined. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch premiered on March 31, 2020 on History Channel and immediately became the network's highest-rated series. Brandon Fugal, a real estate billionaire from Utah, purchased the infamous 512-acre property in 2016 for $4.5 million. He assembled a team of legitimate scientists with impressive credentials. Dr. Travis Taylor, an astrophysicist and Pentagon consultant who worked on classified UAP programs. Eric Bard, a principal investigator and geologist. Thomas Winterton, the ranch superintendent who lives on the property. And Caleb Bench, the ranch manager who operates heavy equipment. For Season 7, Brandon brought in Dr. Jim Segala, a physicist specializing in radiation monitoring, to replace team members who had departed. What separated this show from typical paranormal television was its scientific credibility. These weren't ghost hunters with EMF meters. These were PhD-level researchers using peer-reviewed methodology and state-of-the-art equipment. Brandon invested over $2 million annually in research. The phenomena documented were verified multiple times before being claimed. UAPs tracked on military-grade radar systems, radiation measured with calibrated scientific instruments, electromagnetic anomalies verified by independent experts, GPS time dilation effects documented repeatedly, and cattle health issues monitored by licensed veterinarians. The progression through Seasons 1 to 6 showed increasingly aggressive investigation. Season 1 established baseline measurements across the property. Season 2 began initial drilling and excavation attempts. Season 3 intensified mesa investigations with larger equipment. Season 4 focused heavily on the Triangle area. Season 5 discovered an underground cavity using ground-penetrating radar. Season 6 began aggressive experimentation, pushing boundaries further than ever before. Each season became progressively more invasive, building towards something significant that the team sensed was approaching. Season 6 ended with concerning developments that should have served as warnings. Radiation levels were steadily increasing across certain areas of the property. Multiple team members were being physically affected by the investigations. Travis experienced unexplained burns on his skin after certain experiments. Eric suffered severe headaches following investigations in specific locations. Equipment failures became increasingly common, with expensive scientific instruments being destroyed mysteriously. UAP activity became more frequent and appeared more responsive to the team's experiments, as if something was actively reacting to their presence and activities. Brandon had invested over $12 million in the ranch since purchasing it in 2016, with additional millions spent on cutting-edge research equipment, top scientists, and sophisticated monitoring systems. He had promised complete transparency to the public, repeatedly stating, "We'll show everything we find," and building a reputation on honesty and refusing to sensationalize discoveries. Season 7 planning began in early 2024 with the most ambitious investigation yet. Major excavation at Homestead 2, following an underground anomaly detected by ground-penetrating radar showing a metallic signature 150 feet below the surface that was clearly not a natural formation. The team was determined to finally reach it. The Episode 8 investigation was scheduled for May 2nd to 3rd, 2024, as a 2-day intensive excavation at Homestead 2. The team was following an electromagnetic anomaly detected 150 feet underground. Previous drilling attempts at this location had mysteriously failed with equipment breaking unexpectedly, but this time they brought a larger commercial drill rig and better equipment. Travis was determined, "We're reaching that anomaly this time." The full team assembled on site with Brandon Fugal supervising, Dr. Travis Taylor leading the scientific team, Eric Bard managing the excavation operation, Dr. Jim Segala monitoring radiation levels with specialized equipment, Thomas Winterton coordinating logistics, and Caleb Bench operating the heavy drilling machinery. The full camera crew documented everything. 12 people total were on site. Everyone wore radiation badges and safety protocols were thoroughly reviewed before beginning. Drilling began at 8 a.m. on May 2nd. Progress was slow but steady through the hard rock. By noon, they had reached 50 feet depth. By 4 p.m., they were at 100 feet, approaching the target depth. Everyone was excited. believing they were finally going to see what had been hidden below for possibly centuries or millennia. The first warning signs appeared at 4:30 p.m. Dr. Segala's radiation monitoring equipment began alarming. Background radiation was increasing from the normal 0.1 millisieverts to 0.5 millisieverts. While not immediately dangerous, the unusual pattern of increasing radiation as the drill descended deeper was concerning. "We're getting close to something," Segala announced. Travis made the decision to continue drilling. "We've come this far." At 5:47 p.m. at a depth of 147 feet, the drill suddenly hit void space and dropped through into a cavity below. The team's excitement was immediate. "We're through." But then multiple radiation alarms began screaming simultaneously. Dr. Segala's equipment was maxing out, showing readings of 50 millisieverts, then 100 millisieverts, then climbing rapidly past 500 millisieverts. Segala was yelling, "Everyone back now," as the team retreated from the drill site. Against Segala's urgent warnings, Travis insisted, "We need to see what's down there." He ordered a camera to be lowered into the drilled shaft using remote operation from a safe distance. The camera descended 147 feet down into the unknown cavity as Travis watched the monitor intently, then whispered, "Oh my God." The camera revealed a large underground chamber, approximately 40 feet across, with walls that appeared metallic rather than natural rock. The surfaces were smooth with geometric patterns covering them. A central object was visible in the chamber, glowing faintly, the clear source of the radiation. This was technology, not geology. Then, catastrophically, radiation levels suddenly doubled to over 1,000 millisieverts, an immediately life-threatening exposure level. Dr. Segala's equipment began failing from the intensity. He screamed, "Shut it down! Shut it down!" But Travis was frozen watching the screen, refusing to pull the camera. "We need to document this." Brandon intervened forcefully. "Travis, we're leaving now." At that moment, Travis suddenly stumbled, grabbing his head and saying, I can't see right." He fell to his knees. Eric caught him as Travis became semi-conscious. His radiation badge had turned completely black, indicating severe overexposure. "Get him to the truck," someone yelled. The emergency evacuation began immediately. Travis was immediately loaded into a vehicle with Eric driving frantically toward the highway to meet the ambulance. A 911 call was placed simultaneously. "Radiation exposure emergency. We have a man down." An ambulance was dispatched with a meeting point coordinated on the highway. The nearest hospital was 40 minutes away. During the drive, Travis was drifting in and out of consciousness. Eric was terrified, repeatedly saying, "Stay with me, Travis." Travis's symptoms en route were alarming and textbook acute radiation syndrome, severe headache, nausea with violent vomiting, vision problems with difficulty focusing, and confusion with disorientation. Eric documented every symptom for the medical team. Travis's radiation badge showed exposure exceeding 800 millisieverts, a potentially lethal dose that could cause permanent damage or death. They met the ambulance on the highway 25 minutes from the ranch. Paramedics immediately took over Travis's care, starting IV fluids and administering oxygen. His vital signs were concerning, with blood pressure dropping and heart rate dangerously elevated. The ambulance rushed to the hospital with Eric following closely behind in his vehicle. Hospital arrival occurred at 7:23 p.m. The emergency radiation protocol was activated immediately. Travis was taken directly to a specialized decontamination area. Blood work was rushed for complete cell count analysis. A radiation specialist was called in from Salt Lake City and would be flying in overnight. Travis was stable, but listed in critical condition. The diagnosis confirmed acute radiation syndrome. The estimated exposure was 750 to 850 millisieverts, which is significantly above the safe annual limit, but fortunately below the definitely lethal threshold. However, cell damage was highly likely. Long-term effects remained completely unknown at this stage. Travis required hospitalization for a minimum of 72 hours observation, though it could extend to weeks depending on his body's response. Brandon arrived at the hospital at 9 p.m., overwhelmed with guilt. "This is my responsibility," he kept saying. Travis was hired by Brandon, investigating Brandon's property, following Brandon's directives. "I put him in danger." Brandon made an immediate decision right there. Production stops now, effective immediately. The rest of the team was also checked for radiation exposure. Eric Bard had received 150 millisieverts of exposure. Dr. Jim Segala measured 180 millisieverts. Both levels were above safe limits but not immediately life-threatening. They were hospitalized overnight for observation and released after 24 hours. The camera crew had minimal exposure since they were positioned further from the drill site and were all released the same night. Travis's wife Karen was called immediately and flew out from Alabama, where the family lives. Their children were informed that their father, a successful PhD scientist and Pentagon consultant, was now hospitalized from radiation exposure while investigating paranormal phenomena. The family began questioning everything about Travis's involvement with Skinwalker Ranch. The critical 72-hour observation period began. Cell counts were monitored every hour. Travis's white blood cell counts were dropping, indicating bone marrow damage from the radiation. Day 2 brought continued severe nausea. Day 3 showed slight improvement. Day 4 showed stabilization. Travis was finally released after 6 days in the hospital, but ongoing monitoring would be required for months or potentially years. The long-term prognosis included increased cancer risk elevated for his lifetime, possible fertility issues, and potential cognitive effects that wouldn't be known for months or years. The drill site remained a crisis after Travis's evacuation. The hole was still open to the underground cavity, with radiation continuing to emanate at over 500 millisieverts directly at the site, decreasing with distance but leaving the immediate area contaminated within a 50-foot radius. The camera equipment was still down the hole, too dangerous to retrieve. Brandon issued emergency orders. Seal it immediately. Concrete trucks were ordered and arrived within hours. The operation proceeded overnight to fill the entire 147-foot shaft with concrete, completely burying what they'd discovered. By morning, the site was sealed as if it had never happened. The EPA was notified as legally required for any radiation release. They arrived the next morning for full site assessment, taking soil samples and testing water throughout the property. Contamination was localized to the immediate drill area. The rest of the ranch was unaffected. However, EPA findings confirmed radiation levels and detected artificial isotopes, consistent with technology, not geological sources. "What did you find down there?" they asked. Brandon couldn't fully explain. The EPA established a quarantine zone with 100-foot radius from the sealed drill site, marking it with yellow caution tape and radiation warning signs. No entry was allowed for a minimum of 30 days until radiation decay could be measured. The ranch was partially closed for the first time in its history. The film crew was severely shaken. "Travis almost died," they kept saying. Several quit immediately, stating, "Not worth it." The remaining crew demanded better safety protocols or threatened to walk. Union involvement was mentioned. Thomas Winterton, who lives on the property with his family, was deeply concerned. "Is my family safe?" he asked. Radiation monitoring equipment was immediately installed at Homestead 1, his residence, with readings checked hourly. He seriously considered evacuating his family from the ranch. Caleb Bench, who had operated the drill equipment, was worried about his own exposure. His radiation badge showed 75 millisieverts, above normal but below immediately dangerous levels. As a young man wanting a family someday, he had serious fertility concerns. "Is it worth it?" he questioned. Brandon faced a critical decision point on May 4th, 2024, just 2 days after the incident. Travis was stable but hospitalized. The EPA had established quarantine. The crew was threatening to quit. Insurance and History Channel were both calling. A decision was required immediately: continue or stop production. Brandon was required to report the incident to the insurance company within 24 hours. The report described radiation exposure injury, triggering a workers' compensation claim as Travis began filing for medical coverage. His medical bills were mounting rapidly, potentially reaching $500,000 or more. An insurance investigator was dispatched immediately to the ranch. The investigator arrived May 5th and interviewed the entire team, reviewed all safety protocols, examined radiation badges, and requested all footage of the incident. The focus quickly centered on decision-making. Who authorized continuing despite warnings? Dr. Segala had clearly told them to stop, but Travis insisted on continuing, and Brandon allowed it. Liability appeared clear. The insurance company's position hardened quickly. A letter arrived May 8th stating, "Coverage suspended pending investigation." The claim cited the reckless endangerment clause. Intentional exposure to a known hazard voids the policy. Future claims were denied. Season 7 filming had no insurance coverage whatsoever. Brandon's financial exposure became massive. Travis's medical bills became his personal responsibility with no insurance coverage. A potential lawsuit loomed if Travis chose to sue for negligence, which could result in millions in damages plus punitive awards. His career could be permanently ended. History Channel called daily asking, "What's the status? When can filming resume?" Brandon explained the situation. Insurance gone, team member hospitalized, EPA involvement. The network's response was immediate. We need to pause production. Brandon hired attorneys for liability assessment. Their advice was blunt. You're extremely exposed legally. Potential charges included reckless endangerment, environmental violations, and OSHA violations of federal regulations. Stop all operations immediately, they advised. OSHA launched an investigation triggered by the hospitalization. An inspector arrived May 10th for workplace safety review, examining radiation monitoring protocols, emergency procedures, and medical response capabilities. Multiple violations were cited, resulting in $75,000 in fines. Travis filed a workers' compensation claim on May 12th for workplace injury from radiation exposure, including medical costs, lost wages, ongoing treatment needs, and potential disability. The claim totaled $2.3 million. Brandon was in an impossible position. Cannot obtain insurance, cannot film without insurance, History Channel won't allow uninsured production, legal exposure is massive, fines are mounting, Travis's claim is pending, and the crew is demanding safety improvements. There was no clear path forward to continue. Before evacuation, the camera captured 8 minutes inside the underground chamber. Travis later reviewed the footage from his hospital bed along with Eric and Brandon. What they saw defied simple explanation. The chamber was roughly circular, approximately 40 feet in diameter with a dome-shaped ceiling reaching 15 feet high. The walls had a metallic appearance, clearly not natural rock or concrete, but an unknown material with smooth surfaces throughout. Geometric patterns covered the walls completely in precise mathematical sequences that were not random but appeared deliberately designed. The patterns were repeating and similar to crop circle designs but rendered in 3 dimensions. They glowed faintly, either bioluminescent or powered by some unknown energy source. The central object stood approximately 8 feet tall with a cylindrical shape and metallic surface. It appeared to be rotating slowly, or perhaps that was an optical illusion. This object was clearly emitting the radiation that had exposed the team. It was obviously technology, not any natural geological formation. Eric's analysis was definitive. This was built by someone or something. Travis agreed from his hospital bed, calling it the most significant discovery of my career. Dr. Segala's assessment of the radiation signature was equally concerning. Not any known isotope we've ever measured. The age question remained unanswered. Soil layer analysis suggested the chamber had been there for centuries, possibly even millennia, predating modern human civilization. Who built it? When? Why? The purpose remained completely unknown. Most concerning was that it appeared to still be functioning after potentially thousands of years. The power source was unknown. The purpose was unknown. But it was actively operating and extremely dangerous. Had drilling activated it? Or was it responding defensively to the intrusion like an immune system protecting itself? Eric expressed geological confusion. This shouldn't exist at this depth in this rock layer. The geological timeline was completely wrong. The rock formation was 200 million years old, but the object couldn't possibly be that ancient. Yet it was embedded in solid rock of that age. A complete paradox. The incredible discovery should have been published in peer-reviewed journals and studied extensively, but the site was radiation contaminated, couldn't be safely accessed, and was now sealed under 147 feet of concrete. Only camera footage remained as evidence, and they had nearly died obtaining it. Between May 10th to 15th, 2024, Brandon wrestled with the hardest decision of his career. Arguments for continuing were compelling. Most significant discovery ever made at the ranch, 6 seasons invested, millions of dollars spent, public deserves to know, can't quit now. Arguments against were equally strong. Travis nearly died, no insurance coverage, massive legal exposure, crew threatening to quit, EPA restrictions preventing access. A team meeting was held May 12th, with Travis joining via video call from his hospital bed. Brandon asked for honest opinions. Should we continue? Travis, despite nearly dying, said, "This is why we're here. Most important discovery in paranormal history. We can't stop now." But he also acknowledged, "I almost died. My family is terrified." Eric suggested continuing with better protocols and remote investigation to avoid human exposure. Dr. Segala warned, "Radiation levels too high. Cannot safely investigate without specialized equipment that takes months to acquire. Rush it, someone dies." Thomas expressed concern for his family living on the ranch. "Is the ranch safe? Should we evacuate?" History Channel pressured for content. "We need a timeline." Brandon responded, "Safety first. I don't know when we can resume." The financial reality was brutal. Brandon had invested $14+ million total, with Season 7's budget at $3 million, already spending $1.2 million. Stopping meant massive financial loss. Continuing risked lawsuits, lives, and potentially criminal charges. Brandon made his final decision. May 15, 2024. Halt production indefinitely. I cannot in good conscience put my team at risk for a television show. Money isn't worth lives. He called History Channel that afternoon. We're stopping effective immediately. The network was shocked. For how long? Brandon replied. Until it's safe. I don't know when. The network pressed. We need to discuss this. Brandon stated firmly, non-negotiable. Episode 7 aired May 21st, 2024. The last new episode. Weeks of reruns followed with no announcement. Legal counsel required team silence. Brandon stopped posting entirely. Fans speculated wildly. Show canceled? Team member injured? Some theories were surprisingly accurate. Travis was released May 8th and returned to Alabama. Fatigue persisted, headaches continued, but cell counts slowly improved. Insurance negotiations dragged through August. Medical bills reached $680,000, with Brandon paying personally. The EPA extended quarantine to 90 days. Brandon questioned everything. Was this worth it? Yesterday, Brandon finally spoke publicly. He revealed everything. Travis's exposure, the underground discovery, insurance denial, EPA involvement, why production halted, safety over content. Travis has mostly recovered with cancer risk elevated for life. Insurance settled in August with strict conditions. EPA lifted quarantine September 15th. The drill site remains permanently sealed. Season 7 officially ended at Episode 7. Season 8 is greenlit for January 2025 with mandatory safety protocols. Medical personnel required, radiation limits enforced, no drilling without permits. Brandon reflected, I pushed too hard. Travis paid the price, could have died. We found something incredible, but it nearly killed us. Season 8 is coming, but we'll be more careful. Whatever's down there has waited millennia. It can wait until we're ready.
Chaos erupted on Skinwalker Ranch. Travis Taylor was rushed to the hospital after a violent, unexplained collapse that shook the entire investigation. Sensors spiked, the ground trembled, and a blinding flash tore through the east field before every camera went dark. Tonight, we uncover what really happened and why this incident changes everything. Subscribe, because what comes next is far more disturbing. The night had begun with nothing more than a routine sweep across the east field, the kind of quiet pass that usually settled the ranch before darkness tightened around the mesa. The monitors inside the command trailer glowed with steady, predictable readings, and the crew moved with the calm rhythm of practiced habit. But beneath that stillness, something else lurked. An undercurrent the valley had been holding all day, a pressure no one could name, yet every instrument seemed to fear. As the final light drained from the sky, the air thickened, turning sharp and metallic, as if the land itself was warning them to stop. Travis Taylor stepped outside to confirm an unexpected EM spike rising from the base of the mesa. It climbed with unnatural precision, pulsing in measured beats, each one stronger than the last. The crew watched him on the exterior cameras as he followed the readings deeper into the field, his silhouette cutting through the cold. A low vibration began to spread through the soil, rattling the tripods and rippling across the dry grass. Travis paused, raising his meter toward a shimmer drifting just beyond the ridge, an outline bending the air like heat above a furnace. Inside the trailer, Eric Bard called out that the signal was accelerating, sweeping across the spectrum in patterns the ranch had never recorded. The lights flickered, the screens smeared with static, and a sharp crack split through the comms channel. Travis's figure glitched once, then twice, before the feed froze completely. For several seconds, the cameras attempted to recover, struggling to resolve his location through a haze of distortion. When the image finally returned, the field was empty. Travis was gone, erased from the frame as if the night had swallowed him whole. The team tore through the corrupted footage, isolating whatever fragments survived the blackout. Most files were unreadable, cracked open by static, warped by a distortion that crawled through every pixel. But one sequence remained intact, long enough to reveal the final seconds before Travis vanished. The clip opened with the east field drenched in pale moonlight, the grass trembling as if stirred by an unseen wind. Travis moved toward a wavering distortion hovering several feet above the ground, its edges rippling in tight concentric rings. The air around it bent sharply, folding the horizon into a warped mirage that pulsed in perfect interval. Thermal imaging painted the anomaly in deep shades of blue and black, colder than anything naturally occurring on the ranch. Each pulse spread outward in a slow, deliberate rhythm, like a heartbeat echoing through the earth. Travis raised his instrument toward it, and for a moment, the distortion expanded, blooming outward like a translucent shell, before snapping violently back into a tight sphere. The sound on the recording fractured into metallic shrieks, the kind produced when reality itself is dragged across a jagged edge. Eric Bard froze the frame at the exact moment the anomaly flared. A single flash erupted, violent, silent, unnatural, bursting into a lattice of geometric patterns that flickered across the screen for less than a fraction of a second. The shape resembled a dome folding inward, collapsing into itself with predatory speed. Travis staggered, his outline breaking apart into stuttering fragments as the distortion swallowed the space around him. Then the footage collapsed entirely. The screen went white, then black, then erupted into streams of corrupted symbols that crawled across the monitors like living code. When the image finally returned, Travis was no longer in the frame. Instead, something else lingered, an afterimage shaped like a vertical arc of light, suspended above the ground, humming with the faintest trace of motion. And as the team stared at it in stunned silence, the arc flickered once, as if something inside it was trying to step through. The moment the feed collapsed, the crew sprinted into the night, their boots hammering across the frozen ground as the last echoes of the flash bled into the darkness. The east field was unnervingly still, drained of sound, as if the entire valley had stopped breathing. Then they saw him, Travis Taylor, lying face down in the dirt, his body jerking in violent, uncontrolled spasms. The soil beneath him vibrated in rhythmic tremors, each pulse syncing with the residual EM spikes, screaming across their handheld meters. Whatever he had encountered had not simply struck him, it had passed through him. Eric Bard dropped to his knees first, shouting for help as he grabbed Travis by the shoulders. The moment he touched him, Eric recoiled. Travis's skin was ice cold, colder than the night air, cold enough to burn. His eyes were half open, pupils blown wide, darting across a field of visions only he could see. With every convulsion, his limbs scraped across the ground, leaving shallow trenches in the dirt, as if he were being pulled from every direction at once. Radiation alarms clipped to their belts crackled to life, screaming warnings into the air. Levels surged past safe limits, climbing higher with each passing second. The crew dragged Travis backward, desperate to pull him away from the epicenter, but the ground shuddered beneath them, rippling like muscle under strain. A low hum swelled through the field, deep, mechanical, sentient, vibrating through bone more than air. Travis's chest seized, and a thin wheeze escaped his lips, barely audible over the rising resonance. Then, for an instant, he stilled. Every tremor, every spike, every alarm went silent. His mouth opened slightly, as if gathering breath from somewhere distant, somewhere unseen. The crew leaned closer, waiting for any sign of lucidity, any whisper of recognition. What came out instead was a faint, ragged murmur, just 2 words, fragmented by pain, strained through clenched teeth. It reached. His body convulsed again, harder than before, so violently the team could barely hold him down. And as the hum surged back through the earth, louder, deeper, hungrier, it became clear that whatever had touched Travis hadn't finished with him yet. By the time the ambulance doors slammed shut, Travis's condition had shifted from violent convulsions to a chilling, motionless stillness that unsettled even the paramedics. His pulse flickered in irregular bursts, racing one moment and collapsing the next, as if his body was struggling to sync with 2 rhythms at once. At the hospital, doctors surrounded him with hurried precision, cutting away his shirt to access his vitals, only to stop cold when the marks appeared. Thin, symmetrical patterns etched themselves across his chest and spine, glowing faintly beneath the skin like embers cooling in the dark. The shapes weren't burned. sections. They were too clean, too deliberate, arranged in a geometry no injury could naturally produce. As the medical team worked, the monitors beside his bed began to stutter, their readings jumping in sharp, unnatural spikes. The heart rate monitor climbed in perfect intervals, 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, mirroring the same rhythm the ranch had recorded moments before Travis collapsed. Every machine in the room reacted at once, screens flickering, alarms chirping in discordant cries. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, whispering about interference, but nothing explained why only the equipment surrounding Travis was affected. Hours passed, but he remained locked in a half-conscious haze, breathing shallowly, muscles twitching beneath the sheets. When nurses attempted to photograph the marks, the images came back distorted, smeared by streaks of light that bent across the frame. One technician swore she saw the patterns shifting, rearranging themselves like living circuitry beneath his skin. Then, just after sunrise, his body arched violently off the bed, eyes snapping open as every monitor flatlined for a single, deafening second. His lips parted, trembling as if some unseen force had pushed a message through him. And when the sound finally escaped, it wasn't a cry of pain. It was the same low, pulsing hum echoing from deep beneath the mesa. Back at the ranch, Brandon Fugel ordered an immediate lockdown, sealing off the east field before the first rays of morning light reached the mesa. The crew moved with a tense urgency, their faces drained and hollow from the night's chaos. Every instrument touched by the anomaly was quarantined inside the command trailer, cameras with melted connectors, spectrometers frozen mid-reading, and hard drives that pulsed with corrupted data like infected organs. Eric Bard isolated the equipment tied to the EM spike, only to find circuitry warped into twisted spirals, as if some invisible force had folded the components from the inside out. Nothing behaved like machinery anymore. It behaved like residue from an encounter no one was prepared to name. As Eric traced the power surge backward, he found something even stranger. Several devices had activated themselves during the blackout, recording footage no one had triggered, capturing angles the cameras weren't pointed toward. Frames flickered with shapes suspended in darkness, curved arcs of light, drifting orbs, and thin figures standing still against the mesa's ridge. Each appeared for less than a second before dissolving into static, but the impressions lingered like afterimages burned onto the mind. A security guard patrolling the northern fence reported seeing an orange glow rising above the mesa just minutes after Travis was evacuated. The light hovered motionless, swelling and contracting in slow pulses, casting unnatural shadows that crawled across the stone. When he attempted to radio the team, the transmission dissolved into sharp, metallic screeches that sent him stumbling backward in panic. He later admitted the sound felt less like interference and more like something trying to speak through the static. Inside the trailer, the lights dimmed without warning. Every monitor shut off, then flashed to life simultaneously, bathing the room in a cold, synthetic glow. Words formed across the screens, jagged and uneven, as if drawn by a trembling hand. Return the tone. And in that moment, the crew understood the ranch wasn't reacting to their experiments, it was demanding them. The deeper Eric dug into the previous night's readings, the more a single truth became impossible to ignore. The tone they'd broadcast wasn't just another experimental sweep, it was the trigger. Earlier that afternoon, long before the collapse, Travis and Eric had calibrated a new set of frequencies, ones designed to push deeper into the unexplored bands that Skinwalker Ranch had resisted for years. The generator had surged to life with a resonance that vibrated through the soil, humming in layered waves that left the air quivering like disturbed glass. Travis had remarked that it felt too clean, too precise, as if the tone was aligning with something already waiting beneath the mesa. As the generator climbed toward its peak output, several sensors spiked in perfect unison. Instruments that normally behaved like independent watchdogs suddenly mirrored each other, pulsing with a synchronized rhythm that mimicked breath. Eric had paused the sweep briefly, unsettled by how the frequencies seemed to respond rather than propagate. But Travis insisted on continuing. The pattern matched an earlier anomaly they'd never been able to decode. What they didn't know was that they had replicated a pitch recorded only once before, buried inside an obscure Ute oral account referencing the voice that wakes the sky. Hours later, after the collapse, Eric replayed the generator logs only to discover that the tone had never stopped. Even after the power cut, even after the systems went dark, the waveform continued broadcasting from a source the team couldn't trace. It wasn't coming from their equipment anymore, it was emanating from the ground itself. The soil across the east field vibrated in low, granular waves, humming with the same frequency they thought they had shut down. The Earth had learned the tone, absorbed it, and begun replaying it with an intelligence that defied every law of acoustics. More alarming was the pattern embedded within it. Hidden beneath the primary resonance were harmonic layers, subtle, precise, almost mathematical, forming structures that resembled encoded instructions. Eric filtered them, slowed them, inverted them, but one terrifying conclusion grew clearer with every pass. The tone wasn't a broadcast, it was a reply, and the more he analyzed it, the more it shifted, adapting in real time to every modification he made, as if something beneath the mesa was listening closely and adjusting its voice to match his. By sunrise, the ranch had transformed from an isolated research site into a sealed perimeter, buzzing with quiet authority. Without warning, a convoy of unmarked black vehicles rolled through the front gate, their engines idling with a low, predatory rumble. Men in dark jackets stepped out with disciplined precision, carrying cases marked only with coded labels and radiation insignias. No introductions, no explanations, just a terse directive to Brandon Fugel. All experiments were to cease immediately. Their presence was not a suggestion. It was an intervention. Inside the command trailer, the air tightened as the new arrivals examined the damaged equipment piece by piece. They spoke in clipped technical bursts, referencing classifications the ranch team had never heard. One specialist studied the melted circuitry of the tone generator and muttered that the distortion pattern did not conform to known environmental stressors. Another scanned the corrupted hard drives and frowned at data signatures that appeared to regenerate even while disconnected from power. Twice, they asked Eric to explain how the devices had continued recording without batteries. Twice, he had no answer. The unmarked team moved next to the external sensor array, reviewing the moment Travis collapsed. They replayed the final frame repeatedly, the vertical arc of light suspended above the soil, flickering with an internal motion too complex to be an artifact. One agent requested the raw thermal files, and when he saw the geometry of the anomaly, its symmetrical pulse, its cold, deliberate structure, he drew a slow breath and whispered to his partner, "We've seen this formation before?" He refused to elaborate. Outside, near the fence line, another pair of operatives examined the patch of ground where Travis had fallen. They swept handheld detectors across the soil, watching the needles jitter and spike in jagged, unnatural patterns. One asked how long Travis had maintained direct proximity to the anomaly. When Brandon answered 30 to 40 seconds, the man stiffened. "That exposure level isn't survivable," he muttered, not realizing his words carried back to the team still inside the trailer. But their questions shifted from scientific to surgical. They wanted timestamps, angle logs, biometric readouts, anything that documented the exact moment the light engulfed Travis. They wanted to know what he said, what he touched, what he might have carried out of the field without realizing it. And when they learned the symmetrical marks on his chest were still pulsing in the hospital, their expressions changed from rigid professionalism to something colder, recognition. One agent pulled Brandon aside, lowering his voice to a warning barely above a whisper. "Nothing on this ranch is random. Whatever he encountered didn't just strike him, it interacted with him." He paused, eyes fixed on the mesa, like it was watching him back. Then came the question that froze Brandon in place. How long was he exposed to the entity? For nearly 12 hours, Travis drifted in a twilight state, neither conscious nor fully gone, his breathing shallow, his muscles twitching in brief, involuntary spasms. Doctors monitored him, with a mixture of confusion and unease, noting how every machine near his bed behaved as if trapped inside an unseen magnetic field. Heart rate monitors pulsed in perfect triplets. IV pumps stuttered in synchronized beats. Even the overhead lights flickered in rhythmic sequences that matched the same pattern still echoing across the ranch. It was as if whatever had struck Travis had followed him into the hospital, embedding itself inside the very air around him. At 3:14 p.m., his fingers trembled. A nurse rushed to his side just as his eyelids fluttered open, revealing pupils dilated to unnatural black discs. He didn't seem to see the room. He stared through it, past it, eyes fixed on something distant and intangible. A cold shiver raced through the staff as he whispered a string of fragmented words, disjointed and strained, each syllable escaping like it was being forced through him rather than spoken by him. Light, under, stone, coordinates, below. His pulse surged into erratic bursts, and the symmetrical marks across his chest flickered faintly beneath the skin, glowing in perfect unison with the beeping monitors. The doctor leaned close, trying to steady him, but Travis suddenly gasped, as if yanked back from a precipice only he could see. His body arched, and his voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "It followed me." The temperature in the room plunged, frosting the edges of the heart monitor. One nurse stepped back, swearing she heard a low hum vibrating through the floor, resonating up her legs like distant machinery, waking beneath concrete. Then, without warning, Travis snapped fully awake, his eyes locked onto the ceiling, wide and terrified, as if recognizing a presence hovering just above him. Breathing in ragged bursts, he grabbed the doctor's sleeve with surprising strength. "Is the tone still playing?" he demanded. Before the doctor could answer, every machine in the room flared at once, screens brightening into blinding white as a deep pulsing vibration tore through the walls. And for the first time since the incident, Travis began to cry. At the ranch, the quiet should have returned with Travis gone, but instead, the land behaved like a wounded animal, restless and alert. Hours after the ambulance disappeared down the dirt road, the sensors spread across the east field activated on their own. Their displays flickered to life without power commands, broadcasting the same 3-beat pulse that had haunted every experiment leading up to Travis's collapse. The readings didn't drift or fade. They strengthened, growing sharper, louder, more deliberate, until the entire data board inside the command trailer pulsed in a synchronized throb, as if mimicking a heartbeat deep beneath the mesa. Eric Bard paced between monitors, tracing the signals as they drifted along the ridgeline. Their origin point was impossible, buried somewhere inside solid rock. The ground outside trembled in shallow shivers that rattled the tripods and sent dust sliding off the trailer roof. Even the animals sensed the shift. Cattle refused to graze near the fence line, gathering instead in tight circles with their heads fixed toward the mesa, lowing in anxious, guttural tones that echoed across the valley. Local residents began calling the ranch within minutes. Some reported silent orbs drifting above the canyon, gliding effortlessly against the wind. Others described a low mechanical hum vibrating through their homes, so deep it rattled dishes in cupboards and made windows buzz in their frames. One family claimed their porch lights flickered in the same 3-beat pattern before shutting off entirely. Whatever had struck the ranch was spreading outward, rippling across the basin like a stone dropped into dark water. Back at the hospital, Travis lay propped in a dim recovery room, pale and silent. Doctors had cleared him for observation, unable to identify a single medical explanation for the symmetrical marks that continued to pulse beneath his skin. When Brandon and Eric finally entered his room, he looked at them with hollow eyes, as though pieces of him were still trapped out there in the dirt where he fell. He whispered that the light hadn't stopped after the collapse. It had followed him, clinging to the edges of his vision like a silhouette waiting for permission to step forward. During discharge paperwork, the nurse checking his vitals hesitated. The radiation monitor clipped to her belt began chirping, softly at first, then louder, its needle rising toward the red. She checked the device, thinking it malfunctioned, but the readings only climbed higher the closer she moved to Travis. When he exhaled, the monitor spiked violently. Then, Travis looked at Brandon with a distant, trembling clarity and whispered, "It's coming back!" And miles away, on the ranch he'd just escaped, the sensors began pulsing in perfect rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, like an approaching signal counting down.
Something disturbing just surfaced. Dr. Travis Taylor, the lead scientist on The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, broke his silence about a classified episode that was filmed but never aired. For 3 years, fans noticed a gap in Season 2. Episode 7 was skipped entirely, jumping from Episode 6 directly to Episode 8 with no explanation. The network claimed scheduling conflicts. Production logs listed it as postponed indefinitely, but crew members who were there that night tell a different story. And now, Travis Taylor has finally explained why the footage was locked away, why the Pentagon got involved, and why he'll never set foot in that specific location on the ranch again. This isn't about UFOs or strange lights anymore. This is about something that affected the team's perception of reality itself. Something that, according to Travis, broke the fundamental rules of how time and consciousness are supposed to work. Before we dive deeper, subscribe now if you're fascinated by the unexplained, because what follows may change how you view everything that happens at Skinwalker Ranch. When Season 2 began airing in 2021, eagle-eyed fans immediately noticed something odd. The episode guide listed 10 episodes, but only 9 aired. Episode 7 was completely missing from all streaming platforms, DVD releases, and international broadcasts. The gap was so clean, so surgical, that casual viewers didn't even notice. But hardcore fans did. They pulled production schedules, cross-referenced behind-the-scenes photos, and found evidence that Episode 7 had been filmed. Social media posts from crew members in late 2020 referenced the Mesa experiment, a nighttime investigation at a specific location on the ranch that witnesses described as the most intense night we've ever had. Then, suddenly, all references vanished. Posts were deleted. Photos were scrubbed. When fans asked the official Skinwalker Ranch social media accounts about the missing episode, responses were identical and robotic. All available episodes are currently streaming. Travis Taylor himself appeared on a podcast in early 2021, looking visibly exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, voice hoarse, hands trembling slightly when he held his coffee cup. When the host casually asked about the season, Travis paused for an unnaturally long time, nearly 15 seconds of dead air, before saying, "We can't talk about everything we encounter out there. Some things require clearance levels we don't have." The host laughed, thinking it was a joke. Travis didn't laugh back. Instead, he looked directly into the camera and said something that sent chills through viewers. If you experience something that challenges the fundamental nature of causality itself, how do you even explain it? How do you show it to people without... He trailed off, never finishing the sentence. That clip circulated on Reddit for weeks before it too disappeared, pulled by the network for copyright reasons. But not before hundreds of people downloaded it, preserving Travis's haunted expression and that unfinished warning. Then came the leaks. Anonymous sources claiming to be production assistants posted fragmented accounts on paranormal forums. They described an investigation that started normally, but descended into something none of them could rationally explain. Equipment malfunctions were expected at Skinwalker Ranch. Strange lights, weird sounds, electromagnetic anomalies. That was all par for the course. But this was different. According to these accounts, the team's perception of time became unstable. Events happened out of sequence. People remembered conversations that hadn't occurred yet, and the footage, the raw footage that only a handful of people have seen, allegedly shows something that shouldn't be possible to record on a linear timeline. One leaked message, later verified to have come from someone with production credentials, read, "Travis kept checking his watch and insisting we'd been out there for 20 minutes. The camera timestamp showed 3 hours. When we checked our phones, some showed 9 p.m., others showed 2 a.m., but we were all standing in the same location. That's when Brandon ordered everything shut down." Brandon Fugel, the ranch owner, reportedly made an emergency call to his Pentagon contacts that same night. Within 48 hours, 2 men in civilian clothing arrived at the ranch with non-disclosure agreements and portable hard drives. They left with every piece of footage from that investigation. The episode was classified, not just banned, classified under a designation that several sources claim relates to temporal anomaly documentation. And for 3 years, Travis Taylor said nothing about it until now. The location where Episode 7 was filmed is known to the team as The Shelf, a flat, elevated section of land on the eastern side of the property, overlooking a deep ravine. Indigenous tribes in the area have avoided this spot for generations, calling it the place where time breaks. Early Spanish explorers documented strange experiences near the shelf, describing instances where travelers claim to have walked the same path multiple times despite moving forward or arriving at destinations before they had departed. Modern surveyors in the 1970s abandoned mapping the area after GPS equipment began showing their position in multiple locations simultaneously. When the Skinwalker Ranch team decided to investigate the shelf in October 2020, they knew its reputation. But Travis, ever the scientist, wanted hard data. He brought equipment specifically designed to measure temporal displacement, atomic clocks synchronized to GPS satellites, multiple cameras with hardwired timestamps, and sensors that could detect if local time moved at a different rate than the surrounding area. The experiment was simple in concept. Spend 6 hours on the shelf, running tests, measuring everything, and documenting any anomaly. They brought enough battery power for 12 hours just in case. What they didn't prepare for was the possibility that 6 hours might not mean the same thing in that location. According to Travis's recent statement, delivered in a private interview that was leaked against his wishes, the problems began before they even reached the shelf. "We started hiking up at exactly 6:47 p.m., Travis explained, his voice carrying a weight that wasn't there in earlier seasons. I checked my watch multiple times. By the time we reached the top, it should have been around 7:15 p.m. But when we arrived, Dragon's watch said 9:22 p.m. Bryant's said 7:03 p.m. Mine said 6:52 p.m., 5 minutes before we had left. Initially, they assumed equipment malfunction. Watches could be wrong, but the camera timestamps were impossible to dismiss. 3 different cameras, all hardwired to internal clocks, all showing different times, and none of them matching what the team members remembered. That's when I knew we were dealing with something outside conventional physics, Travis said. You can't have 3 atomic clocks showing 3 different times in the same location unless space-time itself is fractured. They set up equipment anyway, determined to document whatever was causing the temporal distortion. And that's when things got worse. The cameras kept recording, but the footage showed events out of sequence. In one continuous shot, Travis is seen setting up a sensor array. In the next frame, the array is already complete and running. Then, 3 frames later, Travis is back to setting it up again, wearing different clothing than he had been wearing moments before. "We thought the cameras were glitching," Travis explained, "but when we reviewed the footage in real time on the monitors, we could see ourselves doing things we hadn't done yet. Not predictions, not premonitions, actual footage of future events playing in the present." Bryant Dragon Arnold, the ranch's security chief, reported seeing Travis walk past him toward the equipment while simultaneously watching Travis stand 15 feet away, talking into a radio. Both versions were solid, physical, real. When Dragon called out, both Travises turned to look at him. "Dragon grabbed my arm," Travis recounted, his voice shaking slightly. "He said, 'Which one are you?' And I didn't know how to answer that question, because if he could see 2 of me, which one was actually me? Was I the one he was touching, or the one standing by the equipment? Or was I both, or neither?" The team tried to leave. That's when they discovered the real problem. The path they had used to reach the shelf was gone. Not hidden, not blocked, gone. The terrain had changed. Where there had been a gentle slope, there was now a sheer drop. The landmarks they'd used to navigate, a distinctive rock formation, a dead tree, existed but in different positions, as if the landscape itself had been rearranged. "We were trapped in a location that was geographically unstable," Travis said, "not just temporally unstable. The actual physical space was shifting. We'd walk 50 feet north and end up south of where we started. We'd head downhill and find ourselves going uphill." The footage from this period, the footage that only a few people have seen, allegedly shows the team walking in straight lines but arriving back at their starting point from different directions. Paths that should have been impossible, geometry that violated Euclidean space, and then the duplicates appeared. "We started seeing ourselves," Travis said, and for the first time in the interview, he looked directly at the camera with an expression of pure, unfiltered fear. Not reflection, not hallucinations, physical duplicates. "I watched myself walk past me. I heard my own voice having a conversation I hadn't had yet, or maybe had already had and was going to have again. Time wasn't just broken, it was looping and overlapping and splitting." Dragon reported seeing himself standing motionless about 30 feet away, just staring back at him. The duplicate's mouth moved, speaking words that Dragon heard in his own mind rather than through his ears. "You're not supposed to see this. We're not supposed to overlap." When Dragon stepped toward his duplicate, both versions moved simultaneously, mirror images, perfectly synchronized, until they weren't. The duplicate moved its hand a fraction of a second before Dragon moved his. Then it smiled, an expression Dragon insists he wasn't making. "That's when I understood," Travis said quietly. "These weren't duplicates. They were us from different timelines, different moments, existing simultaneously in the same space. The shelf wasn't just bending time. It was collapsing multiple time streams into a single location." The team huddled together, trying to formulate an escape plan. But planning became impossible because cause and effect had broken down. They would decide on a course of action, then realize they had already attempted it and failed, or succeeded, or were currently in the middle of attempting it in another version of themselves they could see 50 feet away. Brandon was on the radio, Travis recalled, trying to coordinate with us from the command center, but he was hearing our voices before we spoke. He'd ask us a question, and we'd hear his question after we'd already answered it. The conversation was happening backward and forward at the same time. It was Thomas Winterton, the ranch's superintendent, who finally noticed the pattern. The temporal distortions were strongest near a specific rock formation at the center of the shelf. Every time someone approached it, time became more unstable. Every time they moved away from it, things stabilized slightly. Thomas theorized that something was buried there, Travis said, or maybe something was trying to come through. He described it as a weak point in space-time, a place where the membrane between moments had worn thin. Against Travis's objections, Dragon approached the rock formation with a handheld sensor. The readings went insane. Electromagnetic spikes, gravitational fluctuations, radiation signatures that didn't match any known isotope. And then Dragon disappeared. Not vanished in a flash of light, not pulled into another dimension. He simply stopped existing in that moment. One frame he was there, the next frame he wasn't, but his shadow remained, cast by a light source that no longer had an object to create it. We could hear him, Travis said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dragon was screaming, but the sound was coming from every direction and no direction. It was like he'd been scattered across multiple points in time, and we were hearing all of his screams simultaneously. Then, impossibly, Dragon was back, standing exactly where he'd been, but changed. His hair was longer. His clothes were weathered, as if he'd been wearing them for weeks. His watch showed a date 3 months in the future. Dragon said he'd been gone for 47 days, Travis explained. He described living in a version of the ranch where the rest of us didn't exist, where he was completely alone, trapped in a loop where every day was the same day repeating. But for us, he'd been gone for maybe 3 seconds. Dragon had something in his hand when he reappeared, a small object he claimed he'd found buried near the rock formation. He described it as wrong, something that shouldn't exist in a linear timeline. When he tried to show it to the others, they couldn't focus on it. Their eyes slid off it, unable to perceive its shape. That's when Brandon Fugel made the call to evacuate immediately. The team grabbed what equipment they could and fled the shelf, not caring about the unstable terrain, just desperate to escape. They made it down in what felt like 10 minutes. When they checked their watches, 6 hours had passed. When they checked the camera timestamps, some showed they'd been gone for 14 hours. Others showed 23 minutes. But the worst discovery came when they reviewed the footage later that night. In the background of several shots, visible in the distance on the shelf they'd just evacuated, were human figures. The team counted carefully. There were 7 figures. The team had only consisted of 5 people. The 2 extra figures wore the same clothing as Travis and Dragon, but when the team froze the frame and zoomed in, the duplicates' faces were blurred, distorted, like reality couldn't decide what they should look like. Those weren't us, Travis said flatly. Or maybe they were us from a timeline where we didn't leave. Maybe they're still up there, trapped in that temporal loop. Maybe we are. Maybe the versions of us that came down aren't the originals. How would we even know? That question, how would we even know, haunted the team for weeks. Travis began experiencing what he described as temporal echoes, memories of events that hadn't happened yet, or had happened in a slightly different way. He'd remember conversations with specific words that, when they actually occurred, had different words. He'd recall entire days that nobody else remembered. Dragon refused to talk about his 47 days alone, but his wife reported that he'd wake up screaming about the loop and the ones who didn't make it out. He lost weight, not from lack of eating, but as if his body was still living through those 47 days simultaneously, burning calories in a timeline that no longer existed. The object Dragon brought back from the shelf was confiscated by the Pentagon contractors within hours. Travis never saw it again, but he described it in his statement. It looked like a rock, but its surface moved, not like water or liquid, like time itself was flowing across it. When I tried to pick it up, my hand aged. The skin wrinkled, the veins became more prominent, my fingernails grew. When I pulled my hand away, it returned to normal. That object existed in multiple states of decay and formation simultaneously. The raw footage from that night was seized and classified. The Pentagon representatives reportedly told Brandon Fugel that the investigation had documented a temporal anomaly consistent with theoretical models of space-time collapse, and that public distribution could cause widespread temporal perception disorder. What does that mean? According to leaked documents, analysts who reviewed the footage began experiencing their own temporal distortions. One analyst reported remembering reviewing the footage before it had been delivered to them. Another claimed they watched the same footage on 3 consecutive days, and each time, the events in the video occurred in a different order. The footage itself became temporally unstable, Travis explained in his statement, as if whatever was happening on the shelf infected the recording. People who watched it weren't just seeing what happened. They were experiencing the temporal distortion secondhand. Their perception of time became unreliable. That's when the decision was made at the highest level. Episode 7 would never air. The footage would be locked in a classified facility. The investigation would be struck from all public records. But Travis believes it's too late for complete containment. "Something came back with us from the shelf," he said, his eyes darting to the side as if checking for something just out of frame. "I don't mean a creature or an entity. I mean a pattern, a temporal instability that's spreading. Sometimes I'll be talking to someone and they'll respond to something I haven't said yet. Sometimes I'll walk into a room I've never been in and know exactly where everything is because I've already been there in a future I haven't lived yet." He paused, swallowing hard. "And sometimes, late at night, I see him, the other Travis, the one who stayed on the shelf. He's standing in my backyard or at the end of the hallway or in the reflection of my car window. He looks older, tired, like he's been living all the timelines simultaneously while I've only been living one." Travis ended his statement with a warning. "We opened something at Skinwalker Ranch that we don't know how to close. The shelf is still there, still active, still collapsing timelines into itself. And I can't prove this, but I think that every timeline that collapses creates another duplicate, another version of the people who were there that night. And those duplicates have to exist somewhere." He leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "If you ever go to Skinwalker Ranch, stay away from the eastern shelf. Don't let them convince you to go up there, because if you do, you might come back, but you'll never be sure if you're the same you that went up. And the version of you that didn't make it out, it'll still be up there, living every possible timeline, watching every version of itself, unable to die because it's trapped in a loop where death itself just restarts the sequence." The interview ended there. The video was posted to a fringe paranormal website and removed within hours, but not before thousands of people downloaded it. In the comments, dozens of viewers reported the same experience. While watching Travis's statement, they felt like they'd already watched it before. They remembered details that hadn't happened yet in the video. They anticipated his words before he spoke them. One commenter wrote, "I watched this video 3 times, but I only clicked play once. I don't know how to explain that. I remember watching it, then watching it again, then watching it a 3rd time, but my browser history only shows 1 view. Did I watch it 3 times in 3 different timelines? Am I remembering futures that haven't happened yet?" Another simply wrote, "I saw myself in the background of the video, behind Travis, through the window, but I've never been to his location. I've never met him. How could I be in the background unless..." Travis hasn't appeared publicly since that statement. His social media went dark. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch continued without addressing the missing episode, and production moved all investigations away from the eastern portion of the property. But last week, a hiker in Utah, nearly 50 miles from Skinwalker Ranch, posted a photo to social media. In the distance, standing on a rocky shelf, were 7 human figures. The hiker claimed there was nobody else on the trail that day, but in the photo, the figures were clearly visible. When the image was analyzed, facial recognition software identified 5 of the figures: Travis Taylor, Dragon, Thomas Winterton, and 2 other team members from that night. The other 2 figures had faces too blurred to identify, but they wore the same clothing as Travis and Dragon. The hiker added one final detail. They weren't moving. They were just standing there, completely still, like they were waiting for something. Or like they were stuck. "I watched them for 10 minutes, and they didn't move once, not even to breathe." The question that haunts everyone who knows about Episode 7 is simple but terrifying. If the versions we see now, the Travis Taylor appearing on TV, the Dragon working security, the team continuing their investigations, are the ones who made it off the shelf, then who are the duplicates still standing there? And if we can't tell the difference, does it even matter? If this story disturbed you, subscribe and share this video. Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced time anomalies or felt like you've lived the same moment twice. And if you ever find yourself at Skinwalker Ranch, remember Travis's warning. Some investigations aren't worth the answers. Because sometimes the truth isn't that you found something strange. It's that something strange found you and decided to keep you in every timeline forever. And sometimes the scariest question isn't what happened. It's which version of me came back.